How goes it? Welcome to From Half Court for today, November 13th, 2024. I am Sean Murphy alongside Indiana's own Troy Sergey. Troy, how you doing today, my friend? It is good to see you. You went to your first Pacers game of the season on Sunday. Is that correct?
That is correct, Sean.
How was the experience? What game did you get to see? And what players stood out to you real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Was able to see the New York Knicks come to town and take on the Pacers, and of course, that was a big rivalry. Well, going back to the '90s with Reggie versus Knicks, but of course, last season in the 2000,
Reignited.
yeah, in the 2024 playoffs, with of course the Pacers winning in that Game 7 in the Garden this past May. And it was good to see the guys square up again. Knicks have a pretty different roster than they did just back in May. Of course, seeing Karl Anthony Towns in person, he had a great game. Jalen Brunson, as always, Jalen Brunson. But my goodness, on those Indiana Pacers, Benedict Mathurin really had a coming out party. We knew the guy was good. We knew that he was a great pickup for them and that the Pacers missed them on their Eastern Conference run last year, but he has really proven to be a dynamic scorer. I mean, the dude can shoot the ball. He can drive. He's really, really making some big leaps here in year 3. So if you're a Pacers fan, my goodness, Benedict Mathurin is all that is advertised. And Tyrese had probably his best game of the year. We know that he kind of struggled early on in the season, but to see him 14 assists, and I think he had 35 points as well. So, I mean, that is just unreal numbers. So I think Tyrese is back. But yes, great to see a New York Knicks team that is certainly a lot more talented, I think, than last season as far as on paper. And yeah, good game to watch in person.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the Knicks as far as where they're at right now. I will say the biggest thing you'd want to see is just whether or not the cat fit looks like there's going to be some life to it. And I think the answer so far has been a resounding yes. I think if anything, I've been impressed with how good Karl Anthony Towns has been in the Knicks uniform thus far. And and you know that the ancillary pieces that they have once they get a guy like Mitchell Robinson back and they're able to have kind of like that more prototypical rim protector. And as they just continue to figure out the chemistry, I'm not super worried about the Knicks. And as you brought up with the Pacers, it's been on and off for Tyrese Halliburton thus far this season. But I mean, Benedict Mathurin's looking really good. So yeah, lots more NBA action and just other teams to talk about as we go on in the podcast. But Troy, we got some Pistons news to talk about. Asar Thompson has been cleared to return. We also have some insane Cade Cunningham statistics to go over. Also want to talk a little bit about how the Pistons can improve their fourth quarter woes. But this is From Half Court. Each and every week we talk all things Detroit basketball, NBA basketball, wherever a basketball game's being played, we're going to talk about it. If you like that, sure you like this video, hit that subscribe button, smash the notification bell so you don't miss when we upload and the content that will be coming. But also be sure you follow me on social medias with the handle at Sean Half Court, whether that's X, whether that's Threads, whether that's Blue Sky, all the Twitter clones that are coming up now, because you never know what can happen with the fact that Twitter was used to help an election. Anyway, let's not talk about that. Let's talk basketball. Troy's like, wow, what a journey that intro went on. But Troy, the Detroit Pistons are 4-7 after their first 11 games. On our first pod, going into this season, I remember us saying that 4-6 or 5-5 would be a really good spot for this team to be going into 10 games, and that's exactly where they are. Despite some difficult losses, I think the thing that you can certainly say about this team this year is I think this is what we were expecting last year, and this is certainly, a roster that you can build off of. And there's some momentum that I really think, that this team can really use to see some tangible growth. What have been your thoughts as the season has continued, Troy?
Yeah, every game has been unique, and I think that's the big thing. Every game, I think there's something a little bit new to learn from the table. I thought, obviously, that game against Charlotte when we lost off of a game winner, those are always so difficult to stomach. Literally playing your best basketball up until the last couple of minutes there and losing at the end. I thought, of course, Sunday's game was rough at the very end there with Tobias Harris missing those two free throws at the end. Difficult, and even Jaden Ivey almost had the putback there. His hands didn't quite get on the ball. So, but obviously that Atlanta Hawks game, we were able to win at the end. So I guess, some you win, some you lose. But absolutely, I mean, 4 wins this early on in the season, and just seeing the growth from our team, Sean, from last year to this season, I think you put it very well. Of the growth that we were able to see this season is something that we were hoping to see last year, especially from Cade and Ivy, and I think those guys are really, really the reason we're in a lot of those games and we're playing competitive basketball. I think both of them have really found themselves in the league already of knowing how to score well. We look at how Cade's been able to assist and grab some rebounds. We'll be talking about some incredible stats here in a moment. But for me, Sean, just seeing how things are coming together, even if we're losing a few games at the end there, I think we are just miles ahead of last season at this point.
Yeah, and I think, we've talked, obviously Cade and Ivy are both playing, really well, but I also think, you just look at the, just the supporting cast that they do have that they can actually rely on. Like Malik Beasley coming off the bench and, almost seemingly every night now giving you at least like 15 plus points, at any given time. Tobias Harris, even when he's not, necessarily shooting it super well from, beyond the arc, he's still finding ways to score, whether that be in the mid range or close to the basket. And you brought up, like, if the Pistons, have just, crossed their T's and dotted their I's and, just did a little bit more on the margins and executed in some slight different ways. Like, we're talking about a team that could potentially be like 6-5 right now, or even 7-4, right? Like that. Like the thing is, like, you look at these games and I think you can truly point to things that the Pistons left on the table. Like you brought up, like with the Houston game, you brought up the free throws. To me, that's definitely a factor. But you also just look at, like, it wasn't even just in those final seconds. They shot 69% as a team at the free throw line that night. And then they also gave up 8 offensive rebounds in the fourth quarter alone. And, so, like, for lack of better terms, a couple of those games there, they box out. We're not even having this conversation. Right. And, some of that is, being able to have Jalen Duren on the court and having him available. The left ankle issues have kind of sparred up again, but it does seem like he could be back in the lineup as of recording as soon as Tuesday night. So, like, like tonight. So potentially, like it could be a short lived thing. But I think it just comes back to, this roster is still inherently limited with Isaiah Stewart as your, number one rim protector, because teams can still really uh exploit that, for lack of better terms. Like the real guys that like changed the game and like the momentum for Houston, like obviously Alperen Sengun played really well. But once Tari Eason and Amen Thompson came into the game, the entire complexion flipped. And not only like are those guys like ball hawks defensively, but Tari Eason was finishing at the rim with pretty relative ease. So, like for me, it's like, and then again, you bring up the boxing out and like, just those small things. Not that Isaiah Stewart isn't a great rebounder, but Jalen Duren is an elite rebounding talent, right? So, being able to have him on the court would make a big difference. But I just think, ultimately that is where the Pistons are at, is those small marginal details of 48 minutes of high level execution, and that's really the difference between winning and losing. And, that's the thing about this Eastern Conference. If the Pistons win a couple of those games, they could be like a top 5 seed right now. But, as of today, they would still technically be a play-in team. So the thing that you can say for certain is, and as we said before this season, I was pretty confident that they were not one of the 3 worst teams in the Eastern Conference. And, I think if anything, this team looks like, especially if they stay healthy, if they continue to make improvements and strides, there's no reason they can't be in the conversation for the play-in tournament, especially with where the Eastern Conference is this year.
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. And I think the high competitive, you talked about how competitive Houston was able to play on the defensive end, and we hung our own, right? And all of the games that we've played this season, at least this past week that we were able to unfortunately lose. We think of the Hornets game and the Houston game. My point is, we're there. We're playing that competitive basketball, and I think if we do this all season long, and we still have 70 games left of the season, Sean, 71. Including tonight. So I think if we see this pattern continue, absolutely we can make a push for the play-in spot if it's that ninth or that 10th seed. And I look at teams like Brooklyn, who's won a few games, maybe more than we predicted this season as well. But then you
Mhm.
look at teams like Philadelphia and Milwaukee, who have been rather disappointing. So it is going to be interesting to see how those teams respond, as the season goes on. But I think this team very well could be a ninth or a 10th seed, especially if we see even more growth, because that's something that we would hope to see as the season goes on, is not that they stay the same, but that they get better. And I think this roster and this coaching staff has all the reasons in the world to expect, improvement throughout the year.
Well, and one thing that will certainly help is that Asar Thompson has officially, as of this week, as of Monday morning, I should say, has officially been cleared by the National Basketball Association to return to competitive action. This is per Shams Charania, has been confirmed by the organization as well. And obviously, it's great news for, a top 5 pick from last year's draft who is a dynamic athlete, someone who's already shown to be elite on the defensive end, someone that is a big X factor for where this Pistons team can go, not only this year but in the years to come. And now, as far as when he'll return, this doesn't mean that he's just going to be plugged into the lineup this week and he's ready
Really?
to go. I mean, Troy, there's some people on Twitter that were surprised by that. No, when you're not cleared to play in an NBA game, it wasn't just that he wasn't cleared to participate in NBA games. He couldn't participate in NBA practices. He couldn't play 5-on-5, full contact basketball. And obviously Asar's a guy that's in the gym all the time. He's someone that, he said was working as if he was, being able to full go, but there's being in shape and then there's being in basketball shape. There's being in game ready shape. And for the Pistons, especially when you're looking at, not just the grander picture of Asar's career, but his overall health. Let's remember that he's coming back from something that is a life-threatening illness and thing to occur. Blood clots are not a joke. So I still think, looking at as of today, he was cleared on the 11th of November. It wouldn't surprise me if we don't see Asar till the end of November, beginning of December, to really allow him to be 100% ready and to be fully prepared to come back into the lineup.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great assessment, Sean, of looking at this. And yeah, I think I'm not sure if many people realize how serious of a thing this was with the blood clot. And but I think this he instantly helps this basketball team. We know what he's capable of doing on the defensive end. We know he
Mhm.
is going to give it his 110%. And I think that's one thing, Sean, that we know for sure about Asar Thompson is that he is going to give it his all. He is probably the hardest worker, if not one of the hardest workers, if not the hardest worker on this roster. He is going to just really transform our defense. And I think we saw him score a lot, cutting to the basket and being available for guys like Cade and Ivy to dish out to him as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how he responds to a new coach. I think that's always going to be interesting with a second year player, with a second coach this early on in his career. That's all going to be different. But as far as effort level goes, Sean, that's what I'm looking most forward to with this. And yeah, I think in 2 to 3 weeks, I think that's a good assessment. So.
Well, and another thing as well is you can look at the Pistons and they've already been playing pretty good defense. And
Mhm.
as of today, they're currently 11th in the NBA in defensive rating. And you're able to accomplish that without an Asar Thompson in the lineup. So
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
plug in who's, in theory, but also, as we saw last season, this team's best defender,
Hmm.
plug him into the lineup and, in theory, that should take that up to another level. Now, obviously, again, he's going to need some time to, get reacclimated. It's been about 8 months now since he's played in NBA action, so, this isn't like something where you just brush him right off and he gets plugged right back into the starting lineup day 1, but, knowing the level of player that Asar is, especially, for how young he has a really high basketball IQ. So, I don't think it's going to be long until we see him back into the starting lineup or, into a really significant role with the team. I think he's talked a lot about how he's worked on his handle this offseason as well as,
Mhm.
he's been working extensively with Fred Vinson every single day, since training camp on his jump shot. So, we already saw that he was really effective and, again in the mid-range near the basket last season. In those last few games, we saw that three-point shot, especially in the corner, getting better and better. So, I mean, we've seen the growth and the ascension from Amen Thompson thus far this season. I have no reason to believe that we won't see the exact same thing from Asar,
Mhm.
especially as he gets his feet under him. And so, I think again, just you talk about like the most intriguing prospects on this roster, Asar's near or at the top of the list. And so he's an elevator, especially for this team.
Yeah, yeah, Sean, and that's exciting to think about. I guess I didn't, put the two hand in hand with looking at Amen's leaps and just knowing that there's a strong possibility Asar is going to be taking the same one too. But the defense as well. I mean, this is a totally different
And
team
they're
on the
different
defensive end.
players, they're different
Yeah,
people, but
yeah, yeah,
they're
yeah.
both gym rats, and,
Right, right,
like
right. But
yeah,
looking at our roster,
and they're meticulous about their craft.
yeah, yeah. Looking at
So
our roster and seeing how different our roster is from last season and how much better defense that we have been playing this year with new coach, I just man, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that day. What do you know that second week of December, Sean? What does the Pistons calendar look like? So maybe
yeah,
we can.
they have their schedule pulled up right now looking for, like, what like, a good
Yeah,
potential
right.
return date for an Asar would be, and, just kinda looking at at the schedule as of right now, like, there's a pretty decent break point, like, with, like, the in-season tournament that
Mhm,
they're going to have. They do play on, December 3rd, they play Milwaukee at home, but they play a back-to-back, like,
mhm.
at Boston the next
Oh
game.
wow, yeah,
So, my if again, this isn't me reporting anything. This isn't me, coming out saying that this is going to happen. But if you're asking me for like what I think could be the earliest date, like at the very earliest, I could see at home November 25th against Toronto. But realistically, I think you probably see him December, like probably December 3rd or 4th
mhm,
to be
mhm,
honest.
mhm.
Again, just, no reason to rush him back. He's gonna have the opportunity now to fully participate in practices as well as in 5-on-5 drills, as well as, just scrimmage in general. So, that he's just gonna be working his tail off over the next couple of weeks. So there's no reason to believe that, he won't be ready to go here soon. But again, there's really no reason for them to rush it. So
Right, right. It's gonna be a fun watch.
yeah, but I think the big thing is just happy for Asar
Of
that he's
course.
cleared and that he's able to return to doing what he loves. Just because you could even just tell, like on Sunday, just looking at him on the bench watching the game, let alone going up against his twin brother, like competitors want to compete,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like Asar is like we've talked about multiple times. He lives on a basketball court, and like he's just that's just who he is. So I think just getting back into action, I think you're just going to see not only an energized Asar Thompson, but I think an energized Piston roster that's going to be excited to see him back too.
And you think of high character as well, and I think that's something I look forward to seeing again, and that's something I look for in basketball players, just that high character, and you're right, living, breathing, sleeping basketball, and just one of the nicest dudes you can meet, so, yeah, I'm excited for Asar Thompson.
Yeah, like truly a basketball sicko. And I mean that in the most endearing terms. When I call someone a sicko for basketball, that's a compliment to me.
Yeah, yeah.
So now, speaking of basketball sickos, Troy, Cade Cunningham is having a pretty ridiculously good season.
Mhm,
Per StatMuse, there are 3 players in the National Basketball Association that have 250 plus points, 75 plus rebounds, and 75 plus assists this season. Those 3 players are Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, and Cade Cunningham. Now, Troy, Luca and Nikola Jokic are MVP candidates.
Mhm.
And Cade Cunningham, his name is up there with MVP candidates. Now, I'm not calling him MVP, but I think if he keeps up this pace and is up there numbers wise, I think you're certainly going to be looking at MIP.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
just when you look at the landscape of the National Basketball Association, but even the Eastern Conference, I brought this up before. What guards in the East are better than Cade Cunningham right now? Like really the only guy I can say confidently is Jalen Brunson. And you can make an argument about Tyrese, but thus far, Cade's been better than Tyrese. You can make an argument about Trey Young, but in my opinion, Trey's game is more complete, Cade's game is more complete than Trey's. And you just look at the elevation of Cade on both sides of the ball is confidence. There was the conversations from 97-1 where they where after the Charlotte game, they asked if the Pistons had a Cade Cunningham problem. Um, I think Troy just going out on a limb, those conversations can be put to bed. Like Cade Cunningham is proving every bit and more this season why he was the number one overall pick and why he's an all-star caliber talent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think of that last name that you said, Trey Young. Who would you rather have on your basketball team building around? Who would you rather have as your franchise player moving forward? The answer is Cade Cunningham. And it's just so exciting to see. I guess this is year 4, but year 3
It's
in
really
some
year
ways.
3.
Yeah, really year 3, and seeing just already how he's able to control our offense in the best way. It's exciting to look at, in the future. And I remember even around draft time, 3.5 years ago, we were saying it's no guarantee that you can ever get back to the number one pick. And we saw as Pistons fans, as horrible as the last couple of years have been, we got that 5th pick. So that proves your point even more of, wow, how special was it to get a guy like Cade at that exact time, at that exact moment that fits and complements our offense in such a way. So that's always exciting to look at and to see, looking at the past and how we got to this point. But now looking forward, yeah, he has the pieces. He has the vets. He near playing close to ish 500 level basketball, and everything that I wanted to see out of Cade this year, I'm seeing. Of course, turnovers. We can make maybe a complaint about that, but I wanted to see this leap from Cade this year, and I'm seeing it, and that makes me
Mhm.
really happy.
Yeah, I think it's just the fact of it's the all around game, right? Like we've seen Cade thrive, offensively, you know, throughout his career. We've seen his ability to score and put the team on his back. But I just think it's the fact that he's playing the overall game, making big plays on the defensive end and on the offensive end. It's the fact that, he is, making more of an emphasis on, controlling the glass and, like the way that he is finding open teammates. Now, he is averaging a career high in turnovers this year. And, so you know, as far as that problem, you just want to see it, continue to head in the other direction. But this version of Cade Cunningham, even with the turnovers, is playing a lot a lot more winning basketball than he is losing basketball.
Mhm.
And you just really do see what happens when he gets an ounce of shooting and reliable scorers around him. Like
Yeah.
you're still seeing him getting blitzed all the time. Like you're still seeing, the pressure getting put on him. But I mean, like truly there are no guys in the league that can prevent Cade from getting to his spot when he wants to. Like he moved Rui Hachimura last week around like it was nothing.
Yeah.
He moves around, like if anyone on Houston was trying to keep him from his spot, he was moving around Dylan Brooks, who's one of the tougher wings and one of the better, wing defenders that we have in this league. He couldn't do anything to stop Cade in that game. So,
Right.
like you are just continuing to see that elevation. And again, when you are talking about where Cade can get better, because he can still be a lot better. But, when you are talking about that level of talent, that's how high the bar is, right? Is, being better with the turnovers, getting the percentages up, from beyond the arc. But I think some of that will only get easier as you continue to see, like Jaden Ivey continue to elevate as well. Now, he's had a couple rough games here over the last like week or so, but I mean, I overall he's still, like especially from beyond the arc, he's looking significantly improved. There are still those moments where, he can just, for lack of better terms, be trying to force the issue. Turnovers definitely is an issue for Jaden Ivey as well. And I think that's just the big thing is limiting that as a backcourt because, again, when you are talking about the margins, those points off turnovers, the fast break, opportunities that you do give those other teams, like that's the window that allows other teams back into the game. That's the window where, you cost yourself what was supposed to be a win, right? And, again, that's not happening throughout the entirety of games, but there are certainly, like there are certainly those runs where, for like 4 to 5 minutes in a given time, the Pistons could just look like they forget how to play basketball.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and I think that's kind of a given with a younger team like this. I think there still is some areas of growth, if we're being honest, where that type of stretch, those types of stretches happen. And I think with Ivy, to me, yes, you're right. Some of those turnovers and just what the heck are you doing moments are still present, but I think he overcompensates on the offensive end. I still think that that is something that we can look towards for him. And looking back at Cade, and you talked about how defenses are constantly blitzing him, and I think that's something that is a cause of his turnovers too. I think when you're so ball centered like Cade is, I think that's natural to you know early on in his career commit some of those turnovers. So
right,
it's a patient game. We're in the long game with this, Sean, as you know.
right.
But I'm
Well,
really curious. There's a lot of question marks moving forward in the next 70 games. So
and what I'm really referring to is, like you said, most nights he is compensating, with his scoring ability. But against Houston, he had 8 points, he had 6 turnovers, including, the turnover at the end of the game when he was, when he was midair with the ball in the corner and just threw it right into, the arms of Jabari Smith. And, like there is still those like it's like in those games in particular, when he doesn't have it going and it's pretty clear he doesn't have it going, he will still try to force the issue and will still try, to generate things. And I would argue that forcing the issue was a significant reason why they lost that game against
yeah,
Houston. And
right.
I do agree with you that, it is a young team, so it is to be expected. Those are things that you are going to see. But on the flip side, with the fan base, you lose some of that patience and you lose 28 games in a row. And that's just the reality.
That
So,
is the reality. Yeah.
like even though these are good losses, and I would say that, like as a fan base, there's a lot more reason to be optimistic than there is to be pessimistic right now. You've just not really earned yourself much luxury to have too many of those good losses because we've seen plenty of those over the last couple of years. Fans don't care anymore about a good loss. And so that, like, not to be harsh, but that's just the reality. But despite all that, like according to Pro Basketball Reference, as of today, the Pistons are 6th in overall attendance
It's
this
awesome.
season. So, I mean, like come to show, as we've talked about on this podcast before, if you give people a reason to show up, they will most certainly show up.
Mhm.
And I think that, thus far, like when I was there on Sunday, it was loud. People were excited. And so, I just think there's a lot of reason to look forward to what they can potentially do here in the coming months. And Troy, I think one real opportunity, for this team to potentially make some noise and, to really get some important basketball, like crunch time games, like in like real experience is with this in-season tournament that is
Mm.
starting this week. They
Yeah.
they host Miami, or this game will have already have happened when this podcast came out. Jimmy Butler will not be playing, so in theory that is a very winnable basketball game. But when you look at this group, Troy, They play at Toronto, which they're 2-9. They play at Indiana, which is probably your toughest game of their group because their final game is against Milwaukee, who's free falling right now. And when you look at that group, a Jimmy Butler's Miami, a rebuilding Toronto, a a fluctuating Indiana Pacers that they almost beat opening night, and the Bucks, there's no reason why the Pistons couldn't potentially make it to the knockout round of the in-season tournament. And we talked about last season how this could really be a jumping off point for those young teams. And what did we see the Indiana Pacers do after going to the in-season tournament last year? They went to the Eastern Conference Finals. They got a new level of confidence. They became a different basketball team. So, Troy, looking at these Pistons, I'm not saying that they can make that type of run, but this is the exact type of opportunity that I think that could really help teams like the Pistons.
Go after them is all I gotta say. Go after them, and I think it starts tonight. It 100% starts tonight against the Miami Heat as we're recording Tuesday night, November 12th. I think with this, with that Miami Heat roster without a Jimmy Butler, here is and you're at home, right? Here is a perfect
Well, and the game
opportunity.
will have already have happened when this comes out, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. But still a perfect opportunity as we're recording to
mhm.
really get after it, I think. So
Right, but all 4 of those games, like, the point is, Troy, like, all 4 of those games are winnable.
yes, yes,
Right?
they are.
Like
Yeah.
there is, and at the very least, there's no reason they couldn't go 3-1 and be in
Mhm.
like and have a legitimate case, to make that knockout round. And there's unique ways that they do like tie breaks with like depending on like like how like your win total and like how much you
Mhm.
like your margin of victory, things like
Yeah.
that. But nonetheless, again, I just think, last year, like the Pistons were free falling and then we're in the midst of that crazy losing streak when the in-season tournament was happening. So now I really do think that this is a great opportunity for Detroit to potentially play some games that have playoff like intensity. Not
Mhm.
playoff stakes, but certainly critical games that have more than just a W or an L up for grabs. So
That's right. That's right. I'm excited. I'm excited, and Toronto one too, especially. Yikes, how they've been looking lately. I think that's probably our most winnable game out of all of them. So
yeah. Speaking of the in-season tournament, Troy, now that, we know what it is, we've seen it, like we've seen it last season, and now we're heading into the second annual version of it. Do you have a different level of anticipation going into this in-season tournament now that you know what it is? Do you feel like more excited about it? Do you feel less excited about it? How do you feel going into the IST?
yeah, yeah. I think a little more excited. I was excited last year, but certainly to be close here to Indiana and to watch them perform the way that they did, I thought that really gave a different perspective on the league. Of wow, like you said, a young team who has a lot to play for, who made a couple of upset wins, and here they are playing the Lakers in the championship, game. It was just kind of breathtaking. How did this happen? Oh, well, they had some upsets, and they played great team basketball. So I think, especially now as a Pistons fan, looking into this, yeah, I'm excited too. And I think we only have 1 year to reflect on, but if there's anything we did learn, it's that there can be some overlap with this in-season tournament and what you see in the playoffs. Not saying every winner is going to be an automatic conference finalist, but if you win the in-season tournament, I think it can spark a new level of confidence for your squad for the rest of the regular season, and if your team does make the playoffs.
Well, and even just for the fans as well, it's an extra level of stakes. It's something else to root for. It's something that all 30 teams have an opportunity to compete for. Not that, the teams who have an opportunity to compete for a championship, but you know what I mean.
Mhm.
So with, you know, with these games coming up, like obviously there's going to be a lot of really good matchups throughout the league. And, I do think that now that there is a year under it, I do think it is an opportunity for the league to really, build off of that and showcase and double down on this tournament. But I think one thing that potentially might hurt it, Troy, is just there's been some crazy injuries that
Mm.
have happened over the last couple of weeks. And they're like some of them are freak injuries, some of them are just, really upsetting. I mean, just to name a few, I mean, Chet Holmgren just went down with a hip issue. Paulo Banchero has an injury issue. There's Tyrese Maxey, right as Joel Embiid is coming back. He's going to be out for an extended period of time. Zion Williamson is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. There is a whole litany, like just throughout the NBA. It feels like multiple teams who have, have real aspirations to compete for a championship are seeing themselves having to survive and deal and endure with injuries. And I don't think there's any team that's dealing with it worse right now than New Orleans. By the way, it feels like almost every single player that's key to them is out right now. Even Jose Alvarado just got dealt with an injury. Literally their first game with DeJounte Murray, he breaks his hand.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, Troy, there's really not anything we can do because injuries are just an unfortunate reality of the game. This isn't like football where where it's an insanely violent sport, but there is still physicality. There is still freak things that can happen. So, just hoping that that doesn't affect too many things in the playoff picture and, just, in this tournament either. But I mean, what do you make of all the injuries and, are there any teams in particular that you look at and go, "Man, they might be in real trouble"? I know Orlando in particular, I don't think they're gonna have as high of a seed at the end of the season as we
Mhm.
thought they might have.
Right, right, right. Yeah, certainly unfortunate. All those names that you described. I mean, it's a long list, and I think that's what's the difficult thing as a fan to watch because we know how deep this league is, and there's so many storylines and so many developments this offseason that we were excited about. New Orleans being one of them, but I'm going to have to agree with you that Orlando for me is going to be the one that I am the most, I guess, sad for because of Paulo. I mean, we saw some unreal games this season from him. Just the
Mhm.
what 3 or 4 that he played, especially that one where he dropped the 50 piece. My goodness. So yeah, and they were a team that, and I've said this many times before, they should have gotten past that Cleveland team in that game 7. They were winning for almost the whole game until they collapsed in the fourth quarter. So that to me was a second round team last year, and to lose a guy like Paulo, it's going to be really tough to recover. But I
Mhm.
think what was his diagnosis? How was he out for 2 months? Was that around?
Yeah, it's about it was about I think it was about like 4 to 6 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks, but
Yeah.
realistically, he'll probably be 2 months. I think the
Hmm.
Chet Holmgren injury in particular, is just really devastating too, just because he already has missed an entire season due to
Right.
injury. He
Right.
played all 82 last season, but this year, just to have it because it was just like a freak hard fall,
Yeah.
really awkward right on his hip. And I not that I'm concerned about the big picture for the Thunder because more than likely he'll be back this season. They still have Isaiah Hartenstein that will be coming back here in a couple weeks from injury, but they'll have to survive until then. And, they'll just have to make sure and hope that, they're not really affected too much else. A guy I can't believe I forgot when talking about injury stuff, Kevin Durant dealing with another calf strain, and
Hmm.
he's going to be missing some time as well. Phoenix came out the gates and they've looked like the Phoenix that we all thought they could be
Yeah.
when they put everything together. And the crazy thing is Kevin Durant is as good as he was when he was like 31 and he's like or like even when he was like 27, like he is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
still doing the same damn thing as a scorer that he's done his entire career. It's just now that he's older, really the main difference is he just has a harder time consistently staying on the court. And it's kind of like a vicious cycle because when they have him, they need him
They do. They do. And he's there for them. He's there for them when they need him. He's contributing in so many
until
ways.
he's
And
not,
yet,
is the problem.
what's that?
Until he's not, because
Oh, until he's
he has
not.
injured
Right.
knees.
Right, absolutely, absolutely, and you're right. I think I hate when people use the phrase "vintage X, Y, and Z player," vintage Kevin Durant. No, Kevin Durant never stopped being Kevin Durant. Uh,
Right.
so yeah,
I think that phrase is fitting, like when Derrick Rose, like when he had some good nights as like a Piston, it's like, oh, there's vintage Derrick Rose because you get those glimpses, right? But it's like you said, it's like Kevin Durant's been doing this like for almost 17 years now. I mean, he was a Seattle Supersonic
Yeah,
doing this in freaking Seattle, Washington when I was like 10 years old.
yeah,
And now I'm in my late 20s and this guy's still doing the exact same thing.
that's right, that's
It's
right.
it's crazy. Um let's talk a little bit, Troy, just about some teams that are just some disappointing things
Mhm.
kind of throughout the league thus far. This one might surprise you a little bit, Troy. I'm not sure how much Victor Wembanyama you've watched this season. I think if I were to make a list of the most frustrating players to watch in the NBA right now, Victor Wembanyama would have to be at the top of the list because and I think we've talked about this a little bit off pod, but for someone to be 7'6", to have the touch that he does, the generational ability, the all-time efficiency that he could have near the basket, for him to be shooting as many threes as he is, to be playing as on the perimeter as much as he does. Again, you can tell very clearly his game is heavily inspired by Kevin Durant. And don't get me wrong, I get it. Kevin Durant is one of the greatest scorers that this game has ever seen. But the reason why is because Kevin Durant is one of the greatest shooters this game has ever seen. And I'm sorry, Victor Wembanyama, but thus far, you have not been that. And you have an advantage that Kevin Durant didn't. And it's that you're 7'6" and have an 8+ foot wingspan. And you can be like a supercharged Anthony Davis, dominant, just freak of nature near the basket and be perhaps be the most efficient player to ever play the game. But Troy, I don't know if I told you this stat or not. Do you know what percentage of shots Victor Wembanyama, like what percent of his shots are 3-point attempts this season?
Yeah, you did not tell me, so I'm gonna have to guess. I did watch a little bit of the Sacramento game last night, and, yeah, he had a lot of threes. I'm gonna guess 43%? Wow.
45%.
Yeah, pretty close.
So almost 1 in 2 jump shots for Victor Wembanyama are from beyond the arc,
Mhm.
and he's shooting 31%. Now, don't get me
Yeah,
wrong, I get it. It is a 3-point game, and that is something that Victor Wembanyama can do.
right.
But Troy, just because someone can do something doesn't necessarily mean someone should be doing that thing.
Right, right.
And obviously, we hope Greg Popovich is well and that he's back as soon as humanly possible. But I have a hard time, imagining Greg Popovich watching his game and not thinking to himself, what is this guy doing shooting so many threes?
Mhm, mhm. Right, right. Yeah, I think that was the first thing I thought of, and I know Pop hasn't been in the picture the past few days, but, you still have a great coaching staff.
Mhm.
You're right. That's around the players and is implementing Pop's coaching philosophy onto the team. Yeah, you would
We
think
have
that.
Chris Paul right there too. How
You
is Chris Paul not
you
losing his mind on the court?
you also have Chris Paul, who speaks certainly as a voice in the locker room. Yeah, I don't know. I have no answers for you, Sean. But I do think that you're right. When you look at his talent, the the Anthony Davis on steroids, it would be the comparison I would see of what I would want out of him, not the Kevin Durant wannabe. And again, especially last night, he was making a few of those threes, and things were looking good. But you can't expect to be shooting that well all 82 games. As a former player, you just can't.
Well, not
You only have a window of those types of games where you're able to shoot the ball like the hoop is a gazillion feet bigger than what it is. So yeah, his game, and he helps that Spurs team when he plays it. It's not just for Victor Wembanyama's game. He makes the Spurs better when he plays his role and what they need to be. So I don't have any
right.
answers for you, Sean.
And I'm not saying he can't shoot any threes because, like you said, there are times where he makes them, and he is like he is not a bad shooter, but he just takes a lot of bad 3-point shots. Like a lot of them aren't even catch and shoot. They're pull-ups, they're moving threes. They're not in the flow of the offense. They're just being taken. And again, I know that it's an emphasis across the entire league. I mean, I looked it up the other day. the 2024 Pistons are shooting 34 threes per game. The 2016 Warriors shot 31 per game, and that led the league at the time.
Right. Right.
Just to give you an idea of where the league is at, like the 2016 Warriors would be like near the bottom of the league right now in 3-point attempts.
Yeah. It's insane.
So,
Absolutely insane.
I get that's where the league's going, but when you have that natural, when you have that gift, and you have that freak like ability to finish near the basket, and that's what we saw really Wimby when he got better, because he kind of did a similar thing last season where he was playing a lot on the perimeter. We talked about that a little bit at the beginning of the rookie year as well. But it felt like as the season went on, he started to realize like, oh wait, I can do that. I can do really well around the basket
Mhm.
because that's the thing. Once he masters that, it's easy for him,
Mhm.
or at least it should be. So when we're talking about a generational talent, a guy that, again, I still believe that he has, all the intangibles and the things to be the player that we know that he can be. But I think part of it, like the biggest hurdle to me right now is his stubbornness of playing this style of basketball. Because in my opinion, if he just keeps playing this way, like, not to sound like a boomer, but I just think there's no way in the world he's going to get near that potential if he continues to play this brand of basketball. He just won't. And
Right.
it's
Right.
like this isn't the Wimby, this isn't the Wimby that people were saying that by next year would be the best player in basketball. Not even close, to be honest with you.
Right, right, right. So yeah, it seems like I'm not going to use the phrase wasted potential, but we saw what this season could be for Victor Wembanyama. We saw that in the Olympics this summer, right? We
Mhm.
saw all the motivation in the world for him to improve the areas of game that we saw maybe that were some holes last season. We saw how it's Chris Paul isn't going to be around the league forever, right? And you have him finally on your roster
Probably
to
his
help.
last season, to be honest with you.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, definitely not wasted talent, but you could make the argument at least wasted first 10 games.
I mean, it's just it is making things way harder than they have to be. And to be honest with you, Troy, I would say wasted potential if he continues to play this way. Because again, he has that type of gift. I don't think there is a player since Shaquille O'Neal that could be this dominant near the basket. Like Victor, like if he just started playing around the basket right now, he would be that good. And by the way, the more that you play in the paint, the more that you do finish around the cup, and the more that you do show you're a threat in the paint, the more teams have to brace for that and give you more room for, guess what? Better
Three.
3-point shots. There's a
Yeah.
reason why there's inside out. There's a reason why that's a phrase. Victor Wembanyama, I'm sorry. You're way too tall to play outside in.
And when we have seen him play inside around the paint, Sean, it comes so easy and natural to him.
Mhm.
And I think that's what's difficult for me is it's like, dude, don't you wanna get buckets? Don't you wanna score? Don't you wanna help your team?
And
Like like
again,
like like like, who cares if it's a dunk or a mid-range shot? It's 2 points.
right. And again, he's had some really good games of late. I know he scored, like, it looks like he scored like 34 against Sacramento and he went 6 of 12 from 3. That's great. My argument to you is unless he's hitting these at a 40 plus percent clip, which he's not, there's no world that Victor Wembanyama needs or should be taking over 5 3-point shots a game, let alone 12. That's
Mhm.
not how Victor Wembanyama is going to be this generational all-time prospect. I know it's a 3-point game, Troy, but we've seen, well, how many bigs have we seen over the last few years win MVP? Yes, they can shoot the three, but that's not their game.
No, right, right, right. You can't call Jokic a three-point shooter. He can hit the 3, but he is not a three-point shooter. He plays around the rim.
Mhm. Yeah, he plays close to the paint. He garners in attention. He's a really good playmaker. He can literally do whatever you need him to. He's a great 3-point shooter, but again, what makes Jokic special is he makes the right decisions and makes the right plays. And I just don't think I just don't think you can make the argument that that is conducive to them winning basketball games.
Mhm.
Speaking of not really being conducive to winning basketball games, the Milwaukee Bucks are just still not doing that. They're still not winning basketball games. And yes, there's moments where they're looking better. There's been some nights where Damian Lillard has looked like the Dame of old. I still don't think you're gonna get that, like extremely consistently. But I mean, Troy, they're 2-8. They're in a pretty rough spot. Doc Rivers, definitively has a worse record than AJ Griffin did with this roster when they had this roster. They're 20th in offensive rating, 22nd in
Mhm.
defensive rating. They don't do anything well. And I'm sorry, but like a 30-plus-year-old or like a mid-30s Chris Middleton isn't coming in and saving this roster.
No, he's not. He's
And
not.
so now it gets into the morbid conversation of, do you think by the end of the season, Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo will both still be Milwaukee Bucks?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think you have to move. You have to move one of them, and I don't. They're in a hard place to be, Sean, because they totally bought in last summer of 2023, with when
Mhm.
they acquired Dame, of all in to win a championship. They got him so Giannis could have a co-star that could be a contender to win the NBA Finals, not just to win the East, but the Finals. Um, I think I don't think that this team has a ceiling beyond the second round as constructed, even the first round. I don't think this is a
Mhm.
conference finals team at all. Um, so I guess that's the question you have to ask yourself if you're the Bucks organization: is are you okay with the second round exit with the roster constructed, or do you want to blow it up? And blow it up is going to look a lot different. I mean, blow it up is there's going to be no going back if you blow out this team, especially if you trade your franchise player of a Giannis Antetokounmpo. I mean, that is just I can't even wrap my head around what that Milwaukee Bucks team will look like moving forward without him. Um,
Right.
I
I mean, if you trade Giannis, that is the full,
Yeah,
like, putting your hands up, waving the white
yeah,
flag. This
yes,
team is done. We are starting anew. And
yes.
Troy, I would make the legitimate argument that they are getting to the point where that's becoming a necessity. I mean, again, I don't wanna make a story that isn't out there, but, like, Giannis Antetokounmpo, there was that clip of him on Twitter. I'm not sure if you saw this, but there's a clip of him in the locker room saying to someone in the background, "Hey, if you don't wanna be here, you can leave." And there still hasn't been any on the record confirmation of who that was to, but the fact that that's already being said in the locker room, and
It's brilliant.
we're only 10 games in. Like, we're not even to Thanksgiving yet, Troy. And that's the difficult thing. Yes, you could say in theory that this team still has like 70 games to figure this out. I don't think that's true. I think they have a 15 to 20 game window to turn this season around. Because if this group gets past Christmas and they're merely just a play-in team, if you're Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo is about to turn 30 years old. He's probably at the peak of his basketball powers for what, another 2 years, 3 years? So, if you're Giannis, he's already said publicly, if he can't win a championship here, you'll have to think long and hard. Well, I think it's becoming pretty apparent that you can't win a championship here.
You're not
And
gonna.
especially if you're talking about like Milwaukee, like in order to desperately fix this, like their one big move last year was to go do what they did to get Damian Lillard. Unfortunately, their big move this year is to get rid of Damian Lillard.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
the bad news is, because of how this has gone, because of how Dame has played, you are not going to get nearly what you would need in return to be able to salvage this situation. And that's why we have to circle back and go to Giannis and the likelihood of him being on the trading block. Because if this is the situation, and we know Giannis is as competitive as he is, like, I don't think he's just gonna say, "Oh, well, I signed here. It's all good. We'll just finish out. I want to be a Buck for the rest of my career." Like, that's all fine and good, but Giannis wants to win championships. We know this. This isn't speculation.
Right.
So, to me, I think I think there's less than a 20% chance that they're both on the roster at the end of the season. I think one of them is almost certainly gone. I think Dame is probably going to want a new home, probably go to Miami like he wanted to begin with. But for Giannis, I mean that's like a 50-50 coin flip at this point. And the fact that we're saying that like 10 games in, I mean, again, this could all turn around in theory. I mean, they do have Giannis, they do have this talent, but I mean, we can only wait for this team to suddenly magically click for so long. And we know one thing's not changing. They're not getting younger, and their supporting cast is sure as hell not getting any better because they have no flexibility in order to do so, which is why you bring up trading Giannis.
Right, right. What's a good destination block for Giannis, Sean?
Well, I saw a Houston team on Sunday that looks like they're a real superstar away from being a real serious contender. And they have a lot of young players that they could potentially trade. I know people have brought up Brooklyn, but I just don't think that's a viable enough contender right now. You could potentially talk to me, talk me into other teams, like who knows if Oklahoma City just pushes all their chips in and go, well, screw it. We can go get Giannis. But I mean, to me, if I'm Giannis and I'm looking around at the scope of the league and I'm going, what teams would interest me? I think the Houston Rockets would be a very interesting destination for him because for one, I mean, obviously Houston, I think they have the players and the picks to get it done. I think the biggest thing that stands out to me about watching Houston is I think they need clarity. I mean, I asked Ime Udoka on Sunday about how he balances having so many different players who can do a lot of unique things, and all like are trying to establish themselves, right? And he said, he doesn't see it as a delicate balance. He's going to reward the players that produce, and I certainly think that that's fair. But I think I think what he won't admit publicly is there is a real difficulty in figuring that out because I think, you just see there's so many different players on that team who just need playing time, right? Like at a certain point, Cam Whitmore can't get on the court because you have Tari Eason, you have Amen Thompson, you have Jalen Green, you have Reed Shepard to worry about in that mix. Like you just have so many different players and a lot of different guys that are really good. But if you bring in a star and condense some of that young talent and give themselves clarity and identity, I think that's the difference. That's what pushes them to the next level. And imagine if you don't have to rely on Şengün as your first option. Imagine if Şengün's your second option.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That
And
really, really would change that team.
yeah, and if you're able to keep if you're able to keep Amen Thompson and Tari Eason and you're able to get you can trade away like Jalen Green, Cam Whitmore, like some of those other like prospects, like a combination of picks, like pick some of the players that you want, right? But to me, the players that they need to keep, I mean, Alperen Şengün, obviously, but to me, the three untouchables on that team, Troy, are Şengün, Amen Thompson, and Tari Eason. Those guys, again, I mentioned this. I think I said this earlier in the pod, or I said this to you before we recorded. The entire game flipped on his head once Tari Eason and Amen Thompson came on the court. And this has been something that Rockets fans have been talking about since the beginning of the season of those guys need to start. And I wholeheartedly agree.
Right, right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, Houston would not have thought any possibilities that New York. I mean, New York already made their big trade. They're not gonna try to get a Dame or
yeah,
certainly
I mean, I just think that I mean, no. I mean, well, they have Jalen Brunson as well, and I just
right,
don't think
right.
those guys would fit well next to each other, especially, defensively. I think, when you're talking about Dame, again, I just think his destinations are pretty limited. And I think if he's going to go anywhere right now, I think he's just going to say, "Look, man, I just wanted to go to Miami. I've made that very clear from the beginning. Please just send me to Miami." And I think that's kind of if they were to do anything, I think that's where he would go. But again, we don't really know what's going on with Jimmy Butler either. And that's where that makes that interesting. And so,
Mhm,
we talk about, like all the different stars and all the movement and how this stuff comes up. Well, these are real catalysts for it.
mhm.
Um, Troy, one last thing I wanted to talk with you about before we wrapped up. We've talked about this team quite a bit, but the Philadelphia 76ers are they are 2-7. They Joel Embiid is going to be making his debut this week and will start playing, but Tyrese Maxey is also now going to be missing some pretty significant time. And so Troy, there's a pretty realistic chance that they're going to head into the playoffs with under 30 games played together as a big 3. And we talked about how important it was for this team to develop chemistry and to get things clicking on all cylinders before they head into the playoffs. Troy, that's not going to happen at all. And my question to you is this team's window now just definitively closed? Because I just to be frank with you, Troy, without Joel Embiid on the court, even with Paul George in the lineup, even with Tyrese Maxey, this is not a good basketball team.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
if I'm being frank with you, like we're seeing Cleveland ascending. They're incredible right now. They're 12-0. And we talked about wanting to talk about them before this pod. We forgot to. We'll have to devote quite a bit of time next week and just talk about how good they've been. New York, we've mentioned how they're ascending. Boston, they look as good as they've been. I just got to be frank with you, Troy. I just think I think Philly, their best shot was like 2 years ago.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Even the pieces of a Paul George. I mean, we look at they had a couple of West Coast games already this season, and they just weren't playing competitive. I thought they're the Philadelphia 76ers team. It's not playing meaningful basketball when they have all the reason to playing meaningful basketball. And I think for an NBA fan to see that here is you've moved a part of so many pieces. You had Jimmy Butler at one point, and then you had a James Harden at another point, and now you cashed in on a Paul George. And yes, you have a developing star in the making and a Tyrese Maxey, but with health and everything going on with Embiid, it just doesn't look like it's going to come together to try to push for an NBA Finals run, like at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. No, I mean, the way this is going, they'd be lucky if they're a playing team at this
Right,
point.
with how it's going now. Right.
Right. And I think the thing that was always a faulty premise with their approach going into the season, because they talked about with Joel about just being healthy, about just making it to the playoffs, being healthy for the playoffs. Like that was the big focus. But as we've seen, like when you have that approach and you pretty much just say, well, we'll be fine. It's the regular season, not the postseason. At that point, if you just completely disregard the regular season and continue to play at this low of level, you're not going to have a postseason to worry about.
Right,
And
right.
so this whole cushion that whatever cushion you've thought that you've had this season is pretty much gone. And here's the other piece, Troy. Do we really think Joel Embiid's not going to miss a stretch period of time a couple months from now? Like from the way they've talked about it, that's almost planned. Like yes, he's going to have stretches where he just won't be playing.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're just going to be getting Joel Embiid for every single game from here on out.
Right, 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 right. It's not like, yeah, this is the start of something great and wonderful of a 70 game stretch of Joel Embiid. Not going to happen at all.
Mhm.
And God forbid, but there's things called minor injuries, but he's not in his younger. I mean, he's what, 31 now?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
he's in his early to mid 30s. He's over the hill as far as his prime, in my opinion. I think we're starting to see, kind of the latter years of Joel Embiid. So,
right,
yeah,
right.
I
That proves
just
your point more.
yeah, he's about to be 31 later this year. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it'll just be good to see Joel Embiid back on the basketball court. We'll see how they're looking a few months from now, but I mean, talk about another team that's locked in on what they have and who they are. And, even though it's a lot of names in that locker room and the roster as far as the sheer like, on paper firepower is appealing, they just I just don't even know if we're even going to see all three of them on the court together much this season. Like this just feels like the new version of the Brooklyn Nets of Kevin Durant and James Harden and Kyrie Irving. It's like, yeah, this is the potential to be a great big three if they played.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, Troy, it's going to be a fascinating season watching things unfold. Thank you for being here and talking about it. And thank you for joining and listening. If you liked the video, be sure you like down below and subscribe to the channel so you're not missing any more of our podcasts. That's going to do it for today. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you're subscribed.